Chipped ham and football. That's what Pittsburgh does. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to our final pre-training camp edition of the show for this year. I'm Brian Batko with you, as always, from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, one of our Steelers beat writers. And we normally have all sorts of guests from outside our outlet on here. We've had Calvin Austin III on, Will Howard on, Kirk Ferentz on in recent weeks. But we're going to throw it back to our roots a little bit this week, and I'm going to be joined by my frequent and I guess kind of in a way former partner in crime on this show, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray and I are going to discuss really just a kind of a position by position preview here for Steelers training camp. Obviously there are some that aren't as relevant, the questions or position battles or anything like that, but we'll find a way to reframe the conversation. And as always, the show is sponsored by Pella. No better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on your energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and your budget. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. On the other side, I'll be joined by Ray Fittipaldo. All right, there he is, Ray Fittipaldo. And Ray, this is old school throwback for the longtime Steelers Post-Gazette podcast listeners. But we had the Pot of Steel, then we had like the original Chipped Ham and football was me and you. So the loyalists hopefully will enjoy this episode.
We had the pod before you too, Brian. We used to do it just recording it on our phone. So good to be back with you. And here we are, another training camp 2025. So ready to get back at it.
Yeah, I mean, normally on this show, I get guests, from the national media or players or former players or whatever. But I figured on the eve of training camp, I mean, who knows the ins and outs of this team better than you? So we might as well keep it in-house for this one. We'll have plenty of opportunities to spread our wings and broaden our horizons throughout the rest of July and August. Ray, I'm going to keep this pretty simple for us. And, we'll kind of figure out what the main headline is at the end of it. But let's just go position by position, preview this team ahead of report day Wednesday at Saint Vincent College. Let's start with the quarterback spot. And while there's not a lot to talk about, let me ask you this question. Do you think it's more likely that Will Howard finds a way to usurp Mason Rudolph, or that Skylar Thompson actually kind of puts the brakes on the Will Howard hype train and wins the QB3 job? I know neither are particularly likely, but it's really kind of a litmus test in your mind for Will Howard.
I do think there's going to be a lot of Will Howard love in training camp from the fans. I think it's natural for them. He's a Pennsylvania kid. He went to Ohio State. There's a lot of Ohio State fans here in Western PA. But I'll go with the latter. I think Skylar Thompson, is a veteran. And while he's not going to make the roster, I think he'll do enough to keep the Will Howard hype down early in training camp. But let me tell you, Brian, there would be no better storyline if somehow Will Howard was able to overtake Mason Rudolph for the number 2. You and I were both there in minicamp. He is a polished, smart dude. I think if he ever does get his footing around here and he gets a chance, I think he's going to be a really popular player. But, yeah, for his first camp, I think the Steelers are going to have him earn it. But I do think he's going to get a lot of playing time in the preseason because I just don't expect Aaron Rodgers to play a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, the tough part of, the flip side of that and that hypothetical would be, you don't want to subject Will Howard to waivers, unless he really struggled in preseason. Someone's probably going to claim him. Like, I'm looking at the quarterback depth charts last night on my phone in bed because, one, I'm just sick in the head like that. And two, I was curious because the Titans put Will Levis, or they're going to put Will Levis, I guess, on injured reserve. The other quarterbacks in Nashville, Ray, behind Cam Ward, who, he's the number 1 pick, but he's still a rookie, Brandon Allen and Tim Boyle. So I wonder if they're going to go out and at least bring in somebody to be the backup, let alone the number 3.
Where's Mitch Trubisky these days, or Kenny Pickett? Well, we know where Kenny Pickett is, but I mean, it's depressing. If you're like the Steelers are right now, the Steelers have a quarterback now, but if you're a team like the Titans and you're counting on your number 1 pick to step in as a rookie, and there's no one to push him or really no one to guide him, right? I mean, it's a tough circumstance. So the Steelers likely will be in that position next year at this time, if not next year, 2 years from now at that time. And I can tell you from experience, just watching this team over the years after Bradshaw retired and before we got the Ben Roethlisberger, there was a whole lot of nothing in there, Brian, in the late 80s, early 90s. You know, a few good years with Neil O'Donnell and Cordell Stewart, but you need that franchise quarterback to make it happen. And that's the case for probably half the teams in the NFL right now.
Well, there was a guy named Bubby, but yeah, here's what I'm rooting for is I hope the Titans keep a close eye on that Browns quarterback situation. Imagine if they get Shedeur Sanders and he and Cam Ward end up being 1-2 on that depth chart. But all right, no more digressions on that. Let's move to another position. Running back. I think this is one that people are going to be interested in watching it in camp because it's just a glamorous position. They're going to have the ball in their hands a lot. They're going to be trying to juke guys out. But I don't know if we're really going to have a great feel for the division of labor until we get to the regular season, or at least the preseason, and see how Kaleb Johnson looks compared to Jaylen Warren, if they even subject Jaylen Warren to many of those hits in August.
Yeah, you know this, Brian, from being around this team for a while now. They almost always make the rookies earn it. And I don't know how you feel about this. I think Jaylen Warren deserves the opportunity to be the number one for at least the first portion of the season. You know, I do think eventually Kaleb Johnson, we're going to get into a touches and carry, pretty much 50-50 split at some point in the season. But Jaylen Warren has earned this. There are a lot of people, I think you were among them last year, probably thought he deserved more playing time over Najee Harris. He's their best pass protector. He's also their best receiver out of the backfield. So I want to see him operate as RB1, in September, maybe early October, with the full expectation that once Kaleb Johnson does earn the coaching staff's trust, the quarterback's trust, that he's going to get in there and get a lot of carries on first and second down. So a lot of people might be disappointed if Kaleb Johnson isn't out there in the opener, but I won't be among them. I think Jaylen Warren deserves this. He's been working hard for 3 years, and I think it's finally his time.
I think the way to look at it with Jaylen Warren is he's always been a model of efficiency compared to Najee Harris. And yeah, perhaps that clip will decrease a little bit if he's, more of a usage guy, but you don't know until you see. You don't know until you find out. Maybe he can, kind of continue to produce on that per carry basis when he's getting more carries. I think that's the vision that they have for him. Anything else on running back before we transition to the pass catchers here?
I will be disappointed a little bit, Brian. Next Tuesday, first day in pads, Friday night lights. Jaylen Warren is always a stud in backs on backers. I don't know if we're going to see that. He's RB1. You have to expose him to that brutal drill. I don't know. So he was always so good at that. It's always a highlight for me, but we might have to do without it this year.
Najee Harris did it last year, remember, for a few reps. And I think we were all kind of surprised that they threw him out there, but it did lead to some of the biggest collisions with Patrick Queen that night at Latrobe Memorial Stadium. Maybe Cordero Patterson will get in there in backs on backers. He should have to block a nose tackle at his size. So remains to be seen what where the Cordero Patterson thing is going, but he is still on the roster for some reason at running back. But okay. We'll just lump kind of all the pass catchers in here together. Let me ask you this about this group, because there's a lot of guys in here. There's the veterans, the newcomers, or at least guys who haven't really had a chance to do anything yet, like Roman Wilson. Give me one guy that you think is maybe being overrated by fans a little bit in the wide receiver and tight end groups, and one guy you think is being underrated a little bit. Not even necessarily by fans, but maybe just by the outside world who don't watch them on a day-to-day basis like we do. So tight ends and receivers, there's a lot of different ways you can go with this.
Yeah, I will say definitely from a national perspective, like if you poll people in the national media or just fans of other teams, they have no idea who Calvin Austin is. But Brian, this guy had, I think, 550 yards receiving, led the team with 4 touchdowns last season. I don't necessarily think he's going to be number 2 in targets, but I do expect to see a jump there, maybe to like 700 receiving yards, I think he'll be a solid number 2. If he stays healthy, I think he's ready for a quote unquote breakout season. Now, in terms of overrated, and I hate to do it to this guy because he really hasn't had a chance yet, but just in terms of being a 3rd-round pick last season, if people were expecting Roman Wilson to like jump in here and, have like 600 receiving yards or anything like that, I just don't see it, Brian. Even in the limited number of snaps he saw last preseason, I thought he was okay, but nothing spoke to me like, oh boy, this guy's going to be a playmaker once he does get out there and stay and gets healthy. So it's not necessarily that he's overrated. I just think in the fans' eyes, you're thinking, okay, 3rd-round pick, he's going to go out there and put up big numbers. I think, for me at least, Brian, Roman Wilson has to prove it to me before I crown him.
I think that's fair. I think if you just look at it more as tempering expectations for a guy, that might be somebody who needs it. I mean, I think it'd be good for the people who are placing the high expectations on him, and probably good for him too, because that had to be a difficult year for him to go through with the injury, with the even if it's just the lunatic fringes of the internet calling him a bust after 5 snaps. I mean, that stuff hurts to hear, I think, for anybody, and especially when let's be honest, his last season in college did not face a ton of adversity. Michigan rolled over people, and he was catching balls wide open and scoring touchdowns, and looking like the go-to guy for at least the the passing game aspect of that national championship winning team. And then it all kind of comes to a screeching halt for him on that first day in pads. So yeah, I think when you consider looking at it that way, Calvin Austin was a 4th-round pick. Roman Wilson was a 3rd-round pick. One guy is, I think, in a lot better position to probably hit the ground running than the other this year. And then you flip it on the other side. George Pickens was a 2nd-round pick. He came out and looked like a stud immediately, his rookie training camp. And, just 1 round later is Roman Wilson. But we know that some of those things are circumstantial. Not all draft picks and draft stocks are created equally. But yeah, I think that's fair to caution people not to just look at it from a pencil in this guy as a 2nd-year, 3rd-round pick on the depth chart.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not saying he's a bust or he's trending towards being a bust, but I think people have to be reminded, Brian, NFL IR rules are kind of lax. The Steelers could have brought him back around Thanksgiving or certainly in December. They just didn't feel like they had a role for him. So if he was truly like an impact player they couldn't do without last season, he would have been on the field. So I think this is a big training camp for Roman Wilson. I think he's got to prove it to his teammates, and he's got to prove it to Zach Azzani and those coaches that he can go out there and have a role in that receiver rotation.
I think the other thing that is worth noting with all the pass catchers, I think in an Arthur Smith offense, role allocation is a pretty big deal, and specializing in certain areas is a pretty big deal. I mean, I remember hearing about that from guys last year in training camp, or even before that, kind of talking to some of the players who had worked with him in Atlanta or Tennessee about what are some things that stand out to you about Arthur Smith, the coordinator and the play caller. And I remember like Scotty Miller, Michael Pruitt sort of saying he doesn't really get caught up in, who's the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3. Right. Anybody can get snaps as long as you do, one part of your job really well, or you're a well-rounded player. So I think Roman Wilson also has to carve out his niche that way too, because, Ben Skoranek is a good blocking wide receiver. Robert Woods, if all goes well for him, he might cement himself as the quote-unquote possession guy. Calvin Austin, the slot guy or even the deep threat. So Roman Wilson has to, I think, find an area where he is trusted to do a specific thing and specialize in that too.
Yeah, you make a great point, because Skoranek is really good in that role. And if they want to go heavy with 2 tight or 3 tight sets with Darnell Washington, there's a chance that a guy like DK Metcalf or Skoranek is going to be on the field, and it might not be a guy like Roman Wilson. So it's very important in this training camp. Yes, Roman Wilson has to go out there and show a rapport with Aaron Rodgers, but he also has to show a willingness to mix it up and to be able to be at least an average to above average blocker if he wants to see consistent snaps on this offense.
Absolutely. All right, offensive line. This is one where I'll ask you this question about this group, Ray. are the backups good enough? Because we know the starting five. There's fewer questions about the starting five for the Steelers offensive line than there's been maybe in my entire time covering the team since 2019. The unit is very clearly defined, but we know that you're going to need your depth. We've seen that other than that 1 year where the Steelers stayed ridiculously healthy on the line, where guys were just playing through injuries. You're going to need to lean on backups at some point. Are the backups good enough, especially at each individual spot of tackle, guard, and center?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not convinced, Brian, but it seems like the Steelers are convinced because I know you took note of this as well. It's not like they just re-signed Calvin Anderson. They re-signed him to a 2-year deal, which makes me think, okay, at the very least, they like him enough that he's probably going to be on this roster no matter what. Now, you could argue his chief competition is probably who? Dylan Cook.
Yeah.
Dylan's been around a while, bounces between the practice squad and the active roster. I mean, I think it goes without saying this is like a make or break year for Dylan Cook, but I don't think it was a great sign for Dylan Cook that Calvin Anderson, that the Steelers committed 2 years to him. So, we'll have to see how that works out. I thought Anderson stepped in last year when he had to, but it wasn't often. I mean, he was a swing tackle pretty much all year, but they really didn't need him because Dan Moore and Broderick Jones stayed fairly healthy. Now, jumping to the inside, I actually think Ryan McCollum has earned it. Like he stepped in last year for Zach Frazier. I think the offense, didn't do great when Zach was out, but they were able to continue winning and they were efficient, especially in that Raiders game when he stepped in there and they ended up winning that game. So I think McCollum can be decent in that role. And we've seen that before, Brian, with guys who come up on the practice squad and, they earn their stripes. Mike Tomlin loves those type of guys. So I won't be surprised at all if McCollum stays in that role as the top backup guard and center. And then to me, you have like the Swiss Army knife and Spencer Anderson. Pretty much play anywhere, guard, center, where tackle, whatever you want him to be. I think we saw last year he was eventually beaten out by Mason McCormick. I think, Mason McCormick has the higher draft pedigree. He's probably going to be the better player, but that's not to say that Spencer Anderson still can't have a role on this team in his third year, with the Steelers. So I think it's a solid group, but certainly there's a lot to prove, and there's going to be a lot of questions if there are some injuries.
Random thing on Spencer Anderson. Remember, he had to start the beginning of last season with no Isaac Seumalo, and looking back now, he faced some pretty damn good fronts. It was the Falcons and then the Broncos. We saw by the end of the season how much havoc the Broncos were wreaking. Yep. So if you were someone who thought he, didn't play that great early in the season when he got his chance, and then the Chargers, I mean, they were a force to be reckoned with too. So, I think Spencer Anderson's someone who maybe doesn't get enough credit for being that utility man on the line. Let's flip-flop over to the defense in a quick second. Ray and I will be right back. All right, Ray, the defensive line. I know there's a lot of bodies on this particular area of the roster, but they've been trying to up the ante with the top of their D-line and getting more talented, getting stronger and more physical. Give me an odd man out on the D-line. And I think when we do the quote-unquote, like, who could be a surprise cut in camp, I think it's usually going to come from this group or maybe the linebacker group.
Yeah.
And to me, I look at it as there's 3 L's here: Loudermilk, Lowry, Lee. Actually, 4 L's: Loudermilk, Lowry, Leal, and Lee. I think 1 or 2 of those guys, unfortunately for them, are probably going to take an L on cutdown day.
Yeah, I think we might have the same idea on who that guy might be. And I hate to do it to this guy because he's a 3rd-round pick, but it's a make-or-break camp for DeMarvin Leal. Let's face it, Brian. I mean, he's coming off a season when he injured his neck. He spent it on injured reserve the entire season, and he's just a guy who's had a hard time finding a role on this football team, even when he was healthy. If you remember, he was that tweener body when he came in. He added a bunch of weight. That didn't work out. Then he cut a bunch of weight. So now we go, okay, can he go back and can he be effective at, 270 or 275? So he's kind of been fighting that tweener status and obviously the injury last year. But if they do decide to keep him just because he was a third-round pick, if I had to pick one other guy in that group, I guess it would be Lowry. It seems like Loudermilk, they kind of know you throw him in there. He'll be solid against the run. With Lowry, 1 sack last year, his first year with the team. I don't know. He just didn't provide a lot of juice, I don't think. So my surprise cut right now will probably be Leal, but if he makes it, I'll say Loudermilk or Lowry would be next on the cut line.
Yeah, and with Leal, the positional questions combined with, like you said, the injuries, that is not a good recipe for someone who's that's kind of like the worst case scenario for a third round pick, and why they can't find their way is if you combine multiple factors like that. And yeah, that's how you can be on the bubble going into year 4. At least we perceive that he's on the bubble. Who knows? Maybe the coaching staff is way higher on him than we are, or maybe they're way lower on him than we are. And they're like, why are you guys even talking about him making the team? Why do you think we've been drafting all these D linemen? So we know YA Black, I think, is going to be on scholarship regardless of how he actually fares. I think he'll fare well, but even if he doesn't, I think he's here for a reason. And Daniel Ikuala is another guy who they signed and gave him a little signing bonus as a veteran. He's that kind of backup nose to Keanu Benton. And yeah, then you get into that kind of classic, 3 technique. And I think Dean Lowry, Isaiah Loudermilk are pretty similar players in that regard. It also depends on, do they keep 6? Do they keep 7? Do they keep 8? Yeah. Last year they ended up keeping 8 because they also had a glut of bodies, and then they sent Logan Lee to IR. So there's a lot of competition there, but is there a real optimism if those guys have to play? I don't know.
Yeah, probably not, right? Because if you lose a starter, then you're counting on guys who, a guy like Ikuale, who was he 30, 31 years old, and last year was his first season as a full-time starter, then you're getting really deep into the depth chart. The one guy I will mention, he's a big strapping dude. You mentioned it. He spent last year on IR. Logan Lee. I think Logan Lee has some potential. He was a 6th-round pick last year. If there's one guy who could potentially knock Loudermilk off the roster, I think it's Logan Lee, because they're similar body types. Those Big Ten defensive ends. Those are the types of guys they're looking for to play that 5 technique. So I think if Lee has a good camp, that actually might be trouble for a guy like Isaiah Loudermilk.
Yeah, and we don't really know. We haven't really seen it out of Logan Lee, because he also went down with injury early in his rookie camp and was always fighting to get back. So if he has any pass rushing juice at all, that would also be a nice way for him to make a name for himself. Okay, the linebacker core in general, I think the edge rushers, there's almost not much to say about, especially now that TJ Watt is locked up. But the inside linebacker room, I think, is a lot more moving pieces there, especially with Malik Harrison coming in from the outside as a free agent signing. Seems like, that's a 2 dogs for 1 bone situation with Carson Bruner and Mark Robinson. And then you also have Cole Holcomb in the mix, and I think he's kind of the ultimate wild card there. I could see him. He's got a wide range of outcomes, from playing meaningful snaps to not being in the equation at all if he isn't the same after that big injury.
Yeah, I think the first one we could agree on is, I think it'll come down to Bruner or Robinson for that special teams role / number 5 linebacker role. I think if Bruner is as advertised in that role, it probably isn't good news for Mark Robinson. I don't know where they find playing time for guys like Malik Harrison and Cole Holcomb if, as we saw in the spring, Brian, they really do give Peyton Wilson a chance to be a 3-down linebacker. If their plan comes to fruition, then you have Malik Harrison, who's on a 2-year, $10 million deal. That's not cheap. Then you have Cole Holcomb, and it's a different situation. They kind of dealt with his contract as he's dealt with this injury. He's not a super expensive player, but certainly got pedigree. I don't know how you find time for those guys. I guess the answer is, and maybe just against teams like the Ravens and other run-heavy teams, you're going to play guys like Holcomb and Harrison more than Peyton Wilson. I guess you could sort of break it down that way. But I don't know about you, Brian. I think Peyton Wilson really deserves this opportunity. He's a playmaker, probably one of the best athletes on that defense, the fastest athlete on that defense. I think you want guys like that on the field as much as you can. So depending on the team you play, I could certainly see Queen and Wilson not coming off the field all that much.
Yeah, the Steelers have had to kind of piecemeal their inside linebacker roles over the years, because they just been a revolving door of them. But I think the best defenses that we've seen in recent years in the NFL have two who pretty much never come off the field and give you a lot of flexibility and coverage and stopping the run. And for some reason, my mind immediately goes to that Bucs team that had Levante David and Devin White. And, those guys were both playing at a really, really high level then. I think that's sort of the ideal scenario for any defense and for the Steelers here with those two. All right, let's finish it out with the secondary. I'll just kind of run down the list here, and you tell me if you think this guy is going to be starter, backup, or might have to go to the practice squad at this point.
Okay. All right.
Juan Thornhill.
Man, you start off with the most difficult one. Right now, Brian, I guess you have to say starter, right? I think, well, you don't have to, but here's my thinking on this. He's a veteran. He's got more experience than Beanie Bishop. I'm thinking they're going to start Jalen Ramsey in the slot, see how Thornhill does, and then if there's any issues there, I think we might see Ramsey flip back there at some point. I think we'll see it regardless with sub packages, but as of right now, not strongly, but I say Thornhill will start.
Beanie Bishop.
Yeah, had a good first half of the season, had 4 interceptions, and for some reason they went away from him. So I don't think they're in love with him. They chose Cam Sutton over him for large portions of the second half of the season. So, like I said, I think Ramsey's going to start there, but I think Beanie Bishop will be on the team, and I think he'll be a solid backup in the slot.
Sticking at cornerback, Corey Trice Jr.
Big camp for Corey Trice. He's got to prove he can stay healthy, and he's got to prove that he can be a starter, because at some point, Darius Slay is not going to be there. They're not going to keep recycling these 33 and 34-year-old corners. They're actually waiting for Corey Trice to be that guy, but injuries have prevented that. So I think he'll be a backup. He'll be on special teams, but he will not be a starter.
And they also signed Brandon Echols this offseason. I'm not even going to bring him up because I assume he's going to make the team. I don't think they would have signed him as quickly as they did, but
yeah, when you brought up this subject, I'm thinking, okay, Echols, I have no idea what that guy's role is going to be.
I think backup outside corner, and I think it'll be like a lesser extent Cam Sutton, sort of. Like he can kind of play wherever, but I'm not really sure. He's been lost in the shuffle a little bit with older guys coming in, younger guys coming in via the draft. Let's go with a couple of rookies here. Dante Kent, 7th rounder out of Central Michigan, cornerback.
Probably scrapping to be on the 53 or more likely the practice squad. 7th round pick. You mentioned they got a lot of numbers at corner. Like probably a lot of people around the league aren't in love with their depth at corner, but so Kent might have an opportunity there. But I'm thinking he's probably going to start the season on the practice squad.
And then back at safety, Sebastian Castro, undrafted free agent out of Iowa.
I don't keep track of these things, but I hear about him on social media. Did he sign like a really good free agent deal, undrafted free agent deal, where one of the highest the Steelers have ever given out? I think is something I read on that. So I think he's going to have
DJ Thomas Jones, the fullback / tight end, definitely did. I'm not sure about Castro, but I do know he was probably the best, quote unquote, like draft snub of this undrafted free agent class.
Yeah, I think out of all the undrafted free agents, and just because there's some uncertainty now at safety with everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks, I think he's got a shot to maybe sneak onto the roster, but I think more than likely he's another practice squad guy as well.
All right. Well, there you have it. Oh, before we go, Ray, who's going to win the punting competition? Cam Johnston, a shoe-in, pun intended, or could Corliss Waitman actually have something to say there?
Oh, it's nice to have somebody like Waitman in your back pocket if something happens to Johnston, but I can't see that this is even a competition, Brian. I mean, they're paying a lot of money to Cam Johnston. He was really good last year in camp before the injury. Unless something has gone on that he's not 100% back, I think he's going to be the guy. But it's certainly going to be a storyline here this summer, just because of the job Waitman did last year when he was called upon.
Yeah, and the paying a lot of money to Cam Johnston part is that's a little bit of a double-edged sword because that would also be reason enough to go with the cheaper guy. But it's still, it's not an exorbitant amount of money. It's a punter, and I think he's still hitting the ball well even after that injury from week 1. And the other part of it, every time we ask Danny Smith about him, it's never about, oh, he has this booming leg. It's about how savvy he is and how he's got game as a punter and can do different things. So I think that's really what they see in him, and will give him the leg up, another pun intended, on Corliss Waitman. All right, Ray, anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No competition with Boswell and Sauls. I guess that's
No, I don't think so. What about Christian Kuntz and Tucker Addington at long snapper?
Yeah, they don't usually bring in like a backup long snapper, so maybe they want to push Christian a little bit. But unless he lost something off of his underhanded fastball there over the summer or over the winter, I think Christian Kuntz is back as well.
I think it might be just as likely that he's even more entrenched now, and they're saying, let's keep him fresh. Let's give him him a blow in camp and in preseason. And he is getting a little bit older. So, that might be reason for that too. All right. Well, for Ray Fittipaldo, I'm Brian Batko. Thanks for tuning into the show. A little throwback to the early days of the Post-Gazette Steelers podcast era. Ray, I will see you tomorrow bright and early at Saint Vincent College. You going to be hauling in a mattress and a mini fridge?
Oh, those were the days when we could stay in the dorms. No, I'll just be I'll be bringing myself, and I'll be checking into the Fred Rogers Center just about the time you are.
All right. We'll see you then, and we hope to see all of you on the YouTube channel and at post-gazette.com for plenty more Steelers content throughout this week at training camp and the 3.5 weeks that the Steelers are out there. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.